The first note was pure accident. Ilara was unpacking a box of kitchenware, her mind 1,000 miles away in a cramped city apartment, when her elbow knocked against the middle C key. The sound was not the tinny blink of her childhood keyboard, but a deep, resonant tone that bloomed in the quiet of the old house and seemed to hang in the air, vibrating in the dust motes dancing in the late afternoon sun. She froze, a chipped mug in her hand, and stared at the piano. It was a monstrous, beautiful thing, a grand piano of dark, richly grained wood that dominated the small living room of the cottage she had inherited. Her great-aunt Beatrice, a woman she had met only twice in her life, had left her this house on Magnolia Street, and everything in it. Ilara had no use for a piano. Her life was built on spreadsheets and silent commutes, a world of predictable numbers and quiet desperation. Music belonged to a part of her she had sealed away after a disastrous piano recital at age 14, a memory that still had the power to make her cheeks burn. She had decided to sell the piano. A dealer was coming from the city next week to appraise it. Until then, it was just a large, inconvenient piece of furniture. But that single, accidental note stayed with her. It was a sound with weight, with history. That evening, after a dinner of toast and tea eaten alone at the small kitchen table, she found herself standing before the piano again. The lid was closed, but she traced the carved swirls on its side. On an impulse, she lifted the fallboard, revealing the ivory keys, some yellowed with age, but all intact. She sat on the worn velvet of the bench, the scent of old wood and lemon polish filling her nostrils. Hesitantly, she pressed a key. G sharp. The note was melancholy and sweet. She played a C major chord, the harmony simple and solid. Her fingers, stiff and uncooperative at first, began to remember their old, forgotten pathways. A simple scale, then a halting rendition of a children's song she had learned decades ago. It was clumsy, full of mistakes, but the piano responded with a warmth that surprised her. It didn't feel like an inanimate object, it felt like a patient, waiting presence. The next day, while cleaning out the attic, she found a small, leather-bound notebook tucked inside a hatbox filled with faded silk flowers. The first page read, in elegant, looping script, Observations on the Nocturnes of Magnolia Street. Beatrice Holloway. Ilara sat on a dusty trunk and began to read. October 12th, an entry began. The full hunter's moon. Mrs. Clark at number 12 played her nocturne tonight. It is always the same, a piece by Field, I believe, but she infuses it with such a profound loneliness that the very air on the street grows heavy with it. The notes drift from her open window, a silver thread of sorrow that seems to lament a son who never writes. I played a response, a simple, hopeful melody in A major. I saw her curtained witch, a small connection, a shared breath in the dark. That is the purpose of our street. Ilara turned the pages, her heart beating a little faster. The entries were sporadic, spanning years. Beatrice wrote of Mr. Henderson at number 4, who played a fierce, stormy Beethoven sonata when he was angry with the world, and of the young couple at number 7, whose clumsy four-handed duets were filled with more laughter than skill. According to Beatrice, the residents of Magnolia Street didn't just play music, they communicated through it. After dark, when the world was quiet, they would open their windows and speak in a language of keys and chords. A nocturne for sadness, a mazurka for joy, a gentle sonata to say, I am here, you are not alone. It sounded like fantasy, the whimsical notion of a lonely old woman. But that night, as Ilara lay in the unfamiliar bed, she listened. The house creaked and settled. A dog barked in the distance. And then, just as the grandfather clock in the hall struck 11, she heard it. A faint, delicate melody, piano music, drifting from somewhere down the street. It was a slow, lyrical piece, tinged with a blue note of longing, exactly as Beatrice had described. Ilara got out of bed and went to the window. The street was bathed in the soft glow of the old-fashioned gas lamps that lined the sidewalk. The music seemed to come from number 12, Mrs. Clark's nocturne. She listened until the last note faded into the night. A profound silence followed, but it was an expectant silence. It was then she understood. They were waiting. They were waiting for a response from Beatrice's house. Her hands felt cold and clammy. She wasn't a part of this. She was an intruder, a spreadsheet analyst who had forgotten how to speak this language. She retreated from the window and went back to bed, pulling the covers over her head, trying to block out the weight of that waiting silence. The following days were a strange interlude. Ilara went through the motions of settling in, but her mind was on the notebook and the piano. She read every entry, learning the musical personalities of her neighbors. The sprightly scherzo of old Dr. Abrams, which meant he had had a good day in his garden. The anxious, repetitive etude from the college student at number 9 during exam season. Beatrice had been the street's unofficial conductor, her piano the central voice that responded to, soothed, and celebrated with all the others. The piano dealer, a brisk man named Mr. Sterling, came on Thursday. He examined the instrument with a clinical eye, tapping keys, peering inside the case. "It's a fine instrument," he declared. "A Heinzelmann. Excellent condition for its age. The soundboard is pristine. I could offer you a very good price." Ilara looked past him at the piano. She thought of the lonely nocturne from number 12. "Could you a broken bar? Could you tell if it's been played often?" she asked. Mr. Sterling smiled. "Oh, most certainly. A piano like this, it's not just furniture. It's a living thing. The wear on the pedals, the slight grooves on the keys, a broken bar. This was played with love, regularly, for many, many years. It has a lot of music left in it." His words struck a chord deep within her. Played with love. After he left, giving her a week to consider his offer, Ilara didn't feel relieved. She felt like a traitor. That night, she didn't wait for the music to start. As dusk fell, she sat at the piano. She hadn't brought any sheet music with her, so she relied on memory and the notebook's clues. She remembered a piece from her childhood lessons, a simple, peaceful piece by Bach, a prelude. It was one of the few she had actually loved. Her playing was hesitant, full of pauses and wrong notes. She was painfully aware of the open window, of the possibility that someone might be listening and judging this feeble attempt. But as she played, her muscles began to relax. The melody, though imperfect, was clear. It was a piece about order, about calm acceptance. When she finished, the silence returned, but it felt different, less expectant, more thoughtful. A few minutes later, from the direction of Dr. Abrams's house, a melody floated back. It was a cheerful, waltzing tune, not a complex piece of classical music, but something lighter, almost folk-like. It was a musical nod, an acknowledgement, a welcome. Tears welled in Ilara's eyes. It was the first time anyone on Magnolia Street had acknowledged her existence. She began to practice in earnest, not for an audience, but for herself, and for the strange, beautiful ritual of the street. She found more sheet music in Beatrice's bench, Chopin, Debussy, simple folk songs. She started with the folk songs. They were forgiving. Her fingers slowly shed their stiffness, and the ghost of her childhood anxiety began to recede, replaced by a flicker of the joy she had once felt. The nightly conversations became the anchor of her days. She learned to identify the players by their styles. The flawless, technically brilliant but emotionally cold sonatas from number 3 were played by a retired concert pianist, a man named Arthur, whom Beatrice's notebook described as brilliant but closed off, his music a fortress. The hesitant, sweet melodies from number 5 belonged to a young girl named Lily, who was just learning. One night, a storm rattled the windows of the cottage. The wind howled, and rain lashed against the panes. Ilara sat by the fire, reading, when she heard it. Not a melody, but a single, dissonant chord, struck hard and repeated from Arthur's house at number 3. It was a sound of fury and frustration. She went to the piano and listened. The chord came again, angrier this time. She remembered Beatrice's entry about Arthur. When the world disappoints him, which it often does, he attacks the keys. He does not need technical advice. He needs a reminder that there is still softness in the world. Ilara thought for a moment. Then, she began to play the gentlest piece she knew, a slow, flowing piece by Satie, The Gymnopatilda copyright die number 1. Its serene, timeless melody was a direct contrast to Arthur's rage. She played it softly, letting the notes weave through the sound of the storm, a musical balm. She played it through once, then, after a moment's silence, began again. When she finished the second time, the street was quiet. Arthur had stopped playing. There was no response, no grateful melody. But the angry chords did not return. The next evening, as the clock struck 11, Arthur played. It wasn't a stormy sonata. It was a Mozart aria, simple, elegant, and beautiful. And for the first time, Ilara thought she heard a hint of vulnerability in it. Weeks turned into a month. Ilara's city life felt like a distant dream. She had stopped checking her work emails. The piano dealer's offer sat in her inbox, unanswered. She was no longer the outsider listening in. She was a part of the conversation. She played a joyful ragtime when she finally managed to fix the leaky kitchen faucet, and the street had responded with a cascade of bright, answering phrases. She played a quiet, mournful air when she found a photograph of a young, smiling Beatrice, and the following night, Mrs. Clark's nocturne had been particularly tender, a shared moment of grief and remembrance. The heart of the ritual, she learned, was the night of the full moon. According to Beatrice's notebook, this was when the street held its symphony. It wasn't planned or conducted, it was an organic event. Someone would start, and others would join in, their melodies layering, harmonizing, sometimes clashing, but always creating a unique, ephemeral piece of music that belonged only to that one night. The harvest moon was due. The air was crisp, and the giant orange moon hung low over the rooftops of Magnolia Street. Ilara felt a nervous anticipation. This would be her first symphony. She sat at the piano, the notebook open beside her, though she no longer needed its guidance. It began with Lily, from number 5, a simple, ascending scale, played with deliberate slowness, which then blossomed into a music box melody. Dr. Abrams joined in with his waltz. Mrs. Clark added her nocturne, the loneliness now tempered by a new, gentle strength. Ilara closed her eyes and let her hands find their way. She played a melody of her own, something that had been forming in her mind for days, a piece about finding a home, about unexpected belonging. It was hesitant at first, but grew in confidence. Then, Arthur from number 3 began to play. And he didn't play alone. The flawless, complex notes of a Brahms intermezzo wove around Ilara's simpler melody, not overpowering it, but supporting it, lifting it, adding depth and color. It was a musical hand, extended. Ilara's breath caught. She adapted her playing, responding to his harmonies, creating a dialogue. The young couple at number 7 added a playful bass line. The college student played a rhythmic, modern chord progression. The street was alive with sound, a tapestry of individual voices creating a breathtaking, cohesive whole. It was chaotic and perfect. It was joy. It was community. They played until the moon was high in the sky. The music didn't end so much as it dissolved, one voice at a time, until only Ilara and Arthur were left, their two melodies intertwining in a final, quiet cadence that faded into the night. The silence that followed was the most beautiful sound Ilara had ever heard. It was full, complete. The next morning, she emailed Mr. Sterling and declined his offer. Then, she went into the garden, something she had been neglecting. The air was fresh, and the leaves on the magnolia tree in the front yard were beginning to turn. As she was pulling weeds, she heard a voice. "That was a lovely piece you played last night. The one you made up." She looked up. A tall, elderly man with sharp, intelligent eyes and a slight smile was standing at her gate. It was Arthur, from number 3. "Thank you," Ilara said, wiping her earth-stained hands on her jeans. "Your Brahms was a broken bar. It was beautiful." He nodded, a little stiffly, but his eyes were warm. Beatrice would have been pleased. She always said the street needed a new heart. "It seems it has found one." He paused. "The bakery on the corner makes excellent scones. Perhaps you would care to join me sometime. I could tell you more about your aunt and the street." Ilara smiled, a genuine, unforced smile that felt like the first one in years. "I would like that very much." As Arthur walked away, Ilara looked down the quiet, sun-dappled length of Magnolia Street. It looked like any other street, but she knew its secret now. She knew that behind every door was a story, and every night, when the clock struck midnight, those stories were told not in words, but in music. And she, Ilara, the spreadsheet analyst from the city, had finally found her voice. She had come home,